Good evening. This is a session of a legislative roundtable. This is an opportunity for district staff, Mayor O'Leary, and the board to discuss issues at the state level with our state representatives. Currently, we have online Ron Napoli and Larry Butler. And as more come in, we will bring them in and introduce them to you. So at this point, the first item on the agenda is state grant and federal funding budget concerns. And we have Mayor O'Leary and Superintendent Ruffin, along with Doreen Biolo, to address those issues. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor O'Leary because I do know that he has to leave shortly.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping I'll be able to stay till about 6:15, but thank you. And maybe I'll be able to stay a little bit longer. But, you know, the big issue this year, of course, is, I'll bring you back for those of you that weren't here in 2017. But in 2017, the legislature didn't pass a budget until October 31st. That was Halloween, I guess. But normally they pass a budget in June, and there was a lot of back and forth about a lot of issues back then. Having said that, the best thing that came out of that budget, in my opinion, was a bipartisan solution to ECS funding, where there was a 10-year plan where the ECS funding would graduate significantly over those 10 years, and it would close the funding gap that of course, the state of Connecticut's own formula, they were failing to follow for obvious reasons. The state was in a financial crisis, and they were unable to meet their obligations. A lot of things happened. The plan was good. We thought, in 2017, the biennium budget included an increase in ECS funding over, they lived up to their obligation in 17, 18, 19, and 20, which really brought millions of dollars on average, $6-7 million a year increase each year in the ECS and Alliance funding with the budget. And Doreen, of course, has all this information. But what's interesting, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Ruffin and Doreen. What's interesting in this year, folks, is that the governor has proposed using ESSER funds to hold cities and towns harmless. So they're going to follow the formula that was put in place in 17, but they're going to use the ESSER money instead of, the typical or normal state money that they have used over the last 4 years. The concern that we all have about that is that's fine if that's the governor's prerogative and ESSER funding allows for that. But in Waterbury's case, it's going to be about 14.2 million over this 2-year biennium budget. So about 7.1 in the first year, 7.1 in the second, or somewhere like that. But it comes out to about 14.2. What concerns me is the next biennium budget, because Waterbury, Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, and then all the towns that get ECF funding. And Senator Hartley's just joined us. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
What's concerning I think to Dr. Ruffin and should be concerning to all of us is that, there's going to be, 2 years from now when they put together the next biennium budget, there's going to be, no more ESSER money, probably. I don't see it. And there's going to be, a $14.2 million or more, because we'll be going into the next biennium budget. It's going to be a big hole. I've talked to the governor about it. He understands it. I'm sure that they have a plan. I know the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities is all over this, and it's just a matter of making sure that everyone recognizes and understands that at the end of this biennium, the state has to start kicking in money again. And so it's going to be a significant amount of money when you average out the formula over the next 2 years. Did I explain that properly, Doreen?
You did great. Yes.
So that's a big concern for us, you guys. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, typically these things get worked out. You know, typically there'll be, you know, public hearings. Even though we're doing a lot of things virtually, the public hearings have been held. I know that some of you have testified in public hearings already. We have Senator Hartley here, Representative Butler and Napoli are very involved in this. But it's something that we really got to keep our eye on because it's so vitally important, particularly for the urban cities in the state of Connecticut and particularly for the city of Waterbury. I would like to turn it over to Dr. Ruffin and Doreen to talk more about what their concerns are, and then we can go from there. Dr. Ruffin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you everyone for being here at the Legislative Roundtable. And Representative Butler and Napoli and Senator Hartley, thank you for being here and for listening to our concerns. I want to reiterate everything that the mayor has shared, and I would like to add the fact that while the ESSER 2 funds are I would consider to be very generous for us as a district and as a city, that there are 4 distinct areas where this funding needs to be utilized to support students and to support social and emotional, to support community and family engagement, to support our technology. There's also a very strong piece that says that the social and emotional piece should add some additional staffing, and it speaks to that both in the ESSER 2, the preliminary distribution or the preliminary award letter, and it spoke to that as recently as meetings that we've had this week. My concern is that with the inability to sustain that really leads us to being able to have a downfall after 2023, because we know that the quickest way to spend money effectively is to really hire more staff. But when you can't sustain that, then you really can't build anything credible to sustain your students' learning and to support their social and emotional. And I think there's a lot of misconception there that says that, yes, you have this money and you can add all of the people to support all of these needs that districts have. We also are very cognizant of the fact that if we add all of these people, we're not going to be able to keep them past 2023, and that's very concerning. The other piece that's concerning is the surplanning, because typically when you're receiving federal funds, you cannot use that to be able to make up for any disparities that you might have in the ECS. And that's very concerning to us. We want to do the right thing, and we certainly don't have a problem with being audited, but when we want to make certain that the funds are appropriately used according to what their allowable expenses are. And that's very concerning to us. And so I appreciate your listening to that. That really is the most challenging thing for me to comprehend, is that we're going to receive a pocket of money that's not going to be sustainable, and we have all of these things that are very needed in a district, but in 2 years after the September of 2023, which is the time allocated to be able to expend this money, there is no further plan. And Doreen, you may want to add to that.
Yeah, again, I want to thank Representative Napoli and Butler and Senator Hartley for taking your time on this gorgeous day, and as always being supportive of us here in Waterbury. But as Mayor O'Leary and Dr. Ruffin have already stated, I mean, as you know, every year we put ECS and Alliance funding on here when we meet every year because it's that important to us. It's our largest funding that comes from the state that supports education. And we understand and very grateful of the federal funds that we're going to be receiving. And as Dr. Ruffin said, there's some restrictions to that. And, you know, trying to make up the gap of having our ECS money on hold for 2 years for the increases does pose a problem for us. So it is problematic, and that's what we're a little bit worried about in the future. And as most business managers across the state of Connecticut, I'm in the CASBO meetings. I mean, it's a concern, even with the stimulus monies that we are going to get. So that's the issue, is the continuation of ECS in the future, and where was that going to continue? Just kind of where we left off in fiscal year 21. So when we get to fiscal year 24, would have been what the amount was for fiscal year 22, or is there some acceleration? I think in the governor's proposed budget, it's pushing it out to 23, so kind of giving it to us on the back end, but it can pose an issue for us when we get to fiscal year 24 and when most of the ESSER funding does end.
So Senator Hartley and Ron and Larry, have you guys heard of these concerns from other colleagues that you're with?
Hi, Mayor. Yeah, so we have had public hearings on some of these issues before the Education Committee, and I can tell you that organizations such as CABE and Fran Rabinowitz, who heads the Superintendent's Association, and even some of the union, CEA and AFT, have spoken out against these concerns about that freeze. So, hopefully that the dialogue and conversation will continue and we can make some progress there. But there are people speaking out against it for sure, as well as people who we serve with.
Okay.
Yes, I could tell you that there's a number of our colleagues that I spoke to about this, and they have great concerns. One of those colleagues is the chair of appropriations that, is actually, coming up with the plan to actually use the appropriations. And part of that is looking at the federal money coming in and the spending and the ECS formula and the amount that we funded at. All those items are actually being questioned in terms of what's the best way to go about utilizing the federal funds without relying on them now, and then a couple of years from now, wondering what we're going to do when they're not there to fill the holes. So, Mayor, what you said is exactly our concern too. We don't want to feel so good about ourselves now in this situation with what you just explained as the governor's plan at this point, and then to come to realize 2 years from now that now we're going to have to fill that big gap that's left by the those federal funds no longer being available. So, but there's ongoing conversations with all of our colleagues that I spoke to. Just to let you know, I don't think this is written in stone anywhere.
Yeah. Well, there certainly is a lot of ambiguity. Senator Hartley?
Yeah, hi, and great to be with all of you. And yeah, I don't know what kind of a day it is out there because I've been locked in here all day, so I haven't seen a ray of sunshine. But maybe before I can get into the car, there'll be a little left. So thanks, Doreen, for telling me about what it was like out there. And the other thing I just want to say, so the Senate has, we've finished for today, and I want to just also, a little off track, but tip my hat to Will. You're going to look very handsome in a black robe, sir. So we're all excited about that. So congratulations. Listen, and so Mayor and board members and superintendent. Yeah, so I just finished a subcommittee just about 5 minutes ago, and it was on transportation and DMV. And so this is a pervasive question. I earlier in the day was meeting with the chair of appropriations on the Senate side, and that is exactly what our conversation was about, this cliff. So there's no question about the fact that we're very happy and welcoming to these incredible tranches of federal money coming in. And then that begs the question of what then happens at the conclusion of those additional revenues. There is no answer up here. And we are dealing with a budget situation which is very finite. Mayor, you know that because you're dealing with yours in the same way. And we've got all this compression. So, you know, for example, you know, we've got before us, and this is just one of, you know, probably hundreds of examples of, you know, the pre-K community and the childcare who, and Lizzie, you know about this very intimately, but, you know, where we're trying to bring up the salary schedules so that they are competitive and we don't continue to bleed and lose these personnel. Yeah, we can do that. But then what happens, to your point, at the conclusion of the CRF money? There is not an answer. And I will tell you that, you know, when we're using this money to bring on staff, that has all the bells and whistles and the alarms for me, because, you know, you can't bring on the staff and then say, okay, and now this is the end of the 24-month, you know, our ability to sustain this. I think one of the most important things, at least when I'm working on the budget from this perspective, is sustainability. And so, Mayor O'Leary, I hear you and, you know, Ann and Karen Harvey and Liz and, you know, every member of this Board of Ed have so well articulated and advocated, you know, for a funding, an equilibrium in the funding cycle. And so we were very upset when the budget came out and the 2017 ECS schedule was pushed off. And there is strong feeling that we need to stay with that commitment. It's kind of like the things that happen all the time. You know, we launch, you know, an initiative, and then, you know, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months down the road, we go back and say, oops, but we saw that with the MRSA, with the car tax, and so forth. But there is, as you know, my colleagues have indicated, Representative Butler and Napoli, that there is a strong feeling that we have to, and Representative DG Von Carlo, hi, to once again stay with that 2017 ECS formula distribution. And then the question becomes, how do we then handle cliffs that are obviously going to be there from these federal infusions of federal money? Look, this economy stands up and we are able to capitalize on the position that we are here seeing in Connecticut right now. We recognize that we've got 22,000 additional families that have moved into the state of Connecticut. Now, when I say this to you all, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, seats in the schools and you know, those increased costs. But with those families comes, you know, many times the employers, the business, you know, the tax revenues that we didn't have. So we are hoping to be able to stand up, you know, this economy in a way that really advances us here. So
it's finally working. It could be the core, yeah. Yeah, but it's very weak. So anyway, thank you. I'll give it to you in a second.
I think that's Representative Reyes.
I think Jerry Reyes, yeah.
Yeah. So look, that's a long way of saying, you know, what my colleagues have said. But as I said, I was just in the room moments ago, actually, about this issue in terms of, because we're now at the juncture with the budget where the subcommittees are doing what's called decision making. Tomorrow morning, I will have mine for the Department of Economic and Community Development, DEEP, Department of Labor, and about 4 other agencies. And then from there, it goes on to a final review by the chairs And then then we go into negotiations with the governor. So that's kind of the timeline. But, my comment is that in actually, utilizing these dollars, we need to think about that eventuality on the cliff. I can tell you, can tell you right now, ever going to be able to match the federal money that's coming in here. It's going to be in the billions of dollars to the state of Connecticut. So there's going to be cliffs. We know it. These are the facts. And I'm happy about the money. But we now have, this dilemma.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Senator. Thank you. Just to give you guys an idea of what, I'm dealing with here. So it's been a terrible year for a lot of our nonprofits because of COVID, including PAL. Fundraising is literally non-existent. And, so we're getting a lot of requests, impassioned requests from most of the nonprofits in the city who are asking for money because they hear that we're getting some, American Recovery Act money in. And, again, we don't know what the restrictions are or anything like that, but, it's kind of been like a pervasive attitude. Well, you're going to get all this money, so, you gotta spread the wealth. And, the problem with that is, just say we were to do that, we were able to do that. I don't know what's going to happen next year or the year after for these nonprofits. So it's really, it's not easy. I mean, I'm happy that we're getting the money on our side. The only two restrictions that have been well published is you can't use the money in it to reduce taxes, which is interesting. And you can't use the money towards pension funds. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we're certainly not complaining, but, it's going to be hard because, there's a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of hands are out. And it's going to cause a lot of anxiety just for some, because we're going to be very, very frugal about all of this, recognizing it's a one-time infusion of revenue and trying to put the money where it's going to mean the most for the city and the district.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could follow up on that. So one of the objectives of actually on the Senate side with regard to the not-for-profits is to try to put in place a plan, kind of like what we did with the institutions of higher education, where there's like a rollout or a phase-in of increased support to not-for-profits for the exact reason that you just said. They have been shuttered. They haven't been able to do, and their fundraising is a major part of their revenue stream. And so they've been flatlined. But even before that, the not-for-profits, that really play an important role in supporting state services and programs have, not been equitably, fairly, reimbursed. And so there is that is a priority, at least on the Senate side. And once again, all this then goes into negotiation to try to institute some kind of a phase-in of, additional resources for the not-for-profits.
Okay, I have Jerry Reyes with his hand raised, and then Board of Ed Commissioner Tom Van Stone. Jerry? Jerry, are you on? It looks like we may have lost Jerry. Tom Van Stone?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and of course through you, when Representative Reyes comes on, certainly I would defer to him. I just had a couple comments for our first agenda item 2, letter A. And as far as ECS and ESSER funds, of course, I've said for years that the small towns around Connecticut did not realize that the S in ECS was for sharing, because they haven't done a good job of that. And I don't expect them to. They've really benefited from how the money was distributed over the years. So that said, I do agree with Senator Hartley that, you know, we shouldn't have such a reliance on it, except in this particular year where it came as such a late notice, you know, that there wouldn't be changes based on the ESSER funds. So I did caution, quite honestly, my fellow board members when we first started talking about the budget, ECS as a whole, prior to the governor making an announcement. I did not expect what did come out. So that was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to all of us. And as the mayor said, there's some restrictions on how you use ESSER funds. However, it's not really clear. And of course, that ties the hand of Dr. Ruffin and her staff on how we can then utilize that as a complement to our ECS funding. That aside, I just, again, I appreciate what we've done as far as ECS. We cannot rely on it, but I do ask our representatives to certainly go back to Hartford and try to at least keep it what we know, so we can, and the mayor even mentioned the year it came out late was very difficult for us on a budget. At least in the current year, you know, once it's there, we need to be able to have that expectation that those funds will be available. You know, going forward, we're going to have to deal with what we deal with. But to get such a late notice, actually, we were meeting as a finance committee the same day on our first go round to send a budget over to the mayor. The same day the governor made the announcement. You know, how do we run a school system, the fourth largest in the state, when we have no idea what's coming from the state? And that's why we rely on you folks to be there for us and make sure things like this just don't happen. You know, and we really need the support. And it seems like we have this conversation each and every year, a little different, but each and every year when we do meet with you. So we really need your help here. You know, Commissioner Sweeney and Commissioner Brown, they went to Hartford, they talked about things, but we need the support from our representatives. And quite honestly, I'm not that comfortable we're getting it. Sorry.
Representative Napoli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just quickly want to go over the ECS process. You know, the Education Committee heard 3 separate ECS bills this session. One they passed yesterday, House Bill 948. It's actually a Senate bill, I'm sorry. And that bill would be very, very advantageous to Waterbury. Waterbury would get an additional $60 million in ECS funding. Now, I will tell you that that was JF to the Appropriations Committee. You know, I don't know where they're going to find the funding for that, but it certainly is a good bill. And if the appropriation chairs are able to find it, then that will be great for Waterbury. The other one we heard was called the Follow the Child ECS funding formula. And the way that would work is they would take a state average of what each student would get. And wherever the student went, whether it was a magnet school, a charter school, a private school, you know, that money would follow them. And in the end, you know, from OFA, which is the Office of Fiscal Analysis, you know, they indicated that public schools districts like Waterbury urban districts will lose a lot of revenue with that. So we certainly decided not to go forward with that proposal. And of course, the third one is the one that we've all talked about, the governor's proposal, which has a freeze on ECS and doesn't catch us up, by the way, you know, until 2030. So, you know, optimistically speaking, 948 is a great bill. We should look at it. I just hope that the Appropriations Committee could fund it.
And do we know, I know the governor's budget came out and it spoke strictly to the formula ECS funding. It did not show anything being withheld for Alliance. And I don't know if that was deliberate and or if the state statute that created Alliance, which means that any increase over 2013 funding has to be Alliance funds and the district has to apply to use those funds. So I didn't see that in the governor's proposal. So is there been any talk of whether that's going to be in there? Because again, it is state statute. I would expect that they would have to apply that formula and provide those fundings. They are our funding. It is our ECS money, but they withhold it and we have to apply to use it. So do we know that?
So historically, the governor's budget usually does not try to adjust those dollars because those are earmarked for schools that really, really need them. So we haven't seen much change there, but this is a legislative process and we have to track the process from the moment the governor gets his budget to the legislature until the legislature and both chambers, finally come up with a document that they could agree on. So it's a process that we certainly have to track.
Okay, so we're seeing the number for the full formula ECS allotment for Waterbury, but nothing. Usually then the governor's budget then has a column for the Alliance funds, which comes out of that formula ECS.
So after after we go through the entire budget process, at the end of that process, we'll receive town runs, and in those town runs will be the ECS dollars and the Alliance dollars as well.
Okay, so in terms of the ECS funding, regardless of where this goes at this point, in terms of the ECS funding, what we will be able to use for general fund purposes is the same $118 million we have been getting since 2013. Because we have to apply for the rest of the increases and use those as Alliance dollars pursuant to that application. So, and this is the other piece of the ECS Alliance issue that is a real problem for Waterbury and becomes more of a problem every year because we have a very small pool of money, $118 million, that can be used for general fund purposes. That's the lights, that's the heat, that's the teacher salaries, that's the teacher benefits, we need to fix the windows in a building, we need to fix the floors, we need to fix the heat system. When are we going to see some increase in that $118 million? This is from 2013. We are now in 2021, and we're still living on the same money that we got in 2013.
Well, their explanation is, and of course, is that there's been increases in the Alliance funding, right?
Well, so
Yes.
there's been actual increases in the ECS, but any increase in ECS from 2013 on then becomes the pool of money called Alliance. And the district has to apply to use those funds. They have to have a plan. And I don't dispute that. But then we can't use that money to fund our general fund issues. And
Right.
they go up every year. They go up every year. We all know it.
Yeah.
Well, we know it too. And I mean, there was a judge that made that very same case in terms of our ECS funding, and that the state really needed to look at that and adjust it accordingly. So we all know that it needs to be done. I think that we're fortunate to have those Alliance funds because just think of where the city would be without those millions of dollars. And we certainly know that they have specific guidelines as to how you could use it, but that's something that we continue to fight for in terms of looking at having more revenues to put into the even if they funded, put more funds in the current ECS formula, Waterbury would make out better than a lot of cities. It's just that the amount of funding that goes into it isn't appropriate. So, but that's our struggle, and we will continue to have those conversations with our leadership in terms of addressing this issue.
Yeah, because if if we want to be sustainable with all the funding that we spend in Alliance, all the initiatives, all the things that we want to do to improve the district, what comes with that is some of those general fund expenses. So it's at some point you can't sustain it, not because we're not getting the Alliance funds, but because we can't use any of it in our general fund to fund those expenses. And that's where it gets really difficult. So you want to sustain these things. We find things that work. We find things that are good for students and good for their education, but we have to be able to sustain them. And some of that is general funds, it's salaries, it's benefits. I don't know any other way to express it. And I know I say it every year, but it needs to be looked at. It needs to be looked at. And I think what we've got coming up next, which is B, looks to me, Bill 6618 looks like we might be moving in that direction. So.
Yes, and again, and you'll get no argument here, but the same kind of expenses that you just talked about for the city, the Board of Ed and education system, the state of Connecticut has those same issues, okay? So let's not be lost on the fact that these are the needs of the city of Waterbury, which we definitely recognize, but we have the same issues at the state level as well. So it's a matter of trying to raise the revenues to address all those areas that you mentioned on a local level, and that we need to make available at the state level as well.
Let's be clear. My request is not for more money, but to have some more flexibility to use the money that we've been given.
I'm well aware of what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and again, it all depends on the source of the money and how the source of the money has been earmarked to be spent. So it's either using flexibility in terms of how the Alliance dollars can be spent, or just looking at the amount of money from the ECS formula that you can use to address your other general budgetary items. One or the other.
Okay.
And I will tell you that yesterday, the Education Committee did pass House Bill 6618, and that will be very helpful going forward because it allows Board of Education's any balance of unspent federal dollars that are COVID related, you can carry those over from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 23. So that will be very helpful.
Yep, and that bill also lists some additional flexibility in spending the Alliance funds. So I'm trying to kind of wade through that because it's quite a wordy section. But I'm hoping that will allow us some more flexibility that will generate some buy power in the general fund.
Yeah, and offline, I can go through the bill with you, but there's also some language in there to use those funds for social and emotional learning, which will be very helpful in this post-pandemic world. So
great, thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we moved into B, which is that Connecticut House Bill 6618. Any other comments on that one? Okay. So we'll move on to our next agenda item. And Dr. Ruffin and I will go through this briefly. School-based arrest. We have brought this up before. And I looked to our delegation. I have not seen yet over the last couple of years when I've asked for this, any legislation come forward on this, but we have a disparity in how districts report school-based arrests. Not all districts report them to the state in the same manner, in the same way, using the same criteria. And I think that it is something that the State Department of Education needs to decide what they want that pool of data to look like and where they want it to come from. And I think everyone should be doing it the same so that we're on an even playing field. To Dr. Ruffin?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Now, I've found in the reporting documents that oftentimes there appears to be some extreme disparities between districts, especially districts similar in size and similar in school numbers and just similar in the way that districts operate, especially the bigger 5 districts across Connecticut. And yet the data is just not reported in the same fashion. And I don't see and have never seen a very consistent way that districts are expected to report it, or how police departments are expected to report it in terms of the students that may or not have received an arrest, or students that are eligible to be referred to some kind of diversionary program. I've not seen any consistency across all of the departments and all of the different districts in how they're required to report that data. So it does look like Waterbury has a totally disproportionate amount. And I don't argue the fact that we have too many students that are being arrested. I believe that we do. I'm not arguing that point. What I am very concerned about is that while we have this number out there for everybody to see, other districts probably have that or more, and it's not reported in the same way. And so for us to be able to systemically change what we're doing and how we're doing that, and to compare ourselves, because we're always being compared to other districts across the state, I think we need to have the same consistent reporting system that's mandated across all of the districts, not just some.
And just to touch on that a little bit more before I do have to go, I do agree with Dr. Ruffin analysis, and I also want to tell you that, and I know there's been a lot of discussion regarding this, but you know, the professional development training, if you were to go through that 1 year where we saw a significant increase in school-based arrests, and it was the year, of course, that you know, the Children's Advocate looked at, which was totally fair. When we dug down deep and reviewed each and every one of those incident reports, you know, there were incidents where de-escalation techniques and other alternatives, at least in my very humble opinion, could have been deployed. Having said that, it was also a training issue on the building administrator's part, in the sense that a disproportionate number of arrests were made in one particular school, and you know, really it boiled down to, I think, in some cases, you know, the administrator not, you know, having the necessary background to realize that some of the calls that went into the police department could have been handled differently. Since then, there's been a lot of work done by this district to train our people accordingly. There's been a lot of work done within the Waterbury Police Department to train the supervisors and staff accordingly. And even though it's been an odd year because of the COVID, you will see a huge decrease when everybody's back to school, hopefully, you know, toward the end of this year, and then we roll through the summer and into the fall, with the new training in place and the new practices in place. you will definitely see a dramatic decrease in school-based arrests. And so I want you to know that. And by the way, a lot of people think that those school-based arrests were based on arrests made by the school resource officers, and they weren't. As a matter of fact, the school resource officers de-escalated and handled many of those issues. Representative DGO Boncarlo, who is here now, joined us quite a few minutes ago, actually, will tell you firsthand, it's the school resource officers that usually don't make the arrest because they have the tools in the chest, if you will, to de-escalate and you know, fix the issue without a school-based arrest. It was the street officer who's not used to being called into schools to handle a confrontation, and the arrest was requested by a member of staff. So look, you know, you got to recognize there's a problem before you can fix it. I think we all know that, and we recognize the problem, and we're working on the problem, and we're fixing the problem. But in all fairness to the school resource officers, that, you know, those uptick in school-based arrests were not school resource officers. Those are officers that were called in off of the street to handle issues that had popped up, and so we've done an extraordinary amount of training, not only on the officers but also their supervisors as well. As a matter of fact, when they get called into a school, supervisors automatically notified now, and if they plan to make an arrest, the supervisor has to respond and you know, take the situation into account before the actual arrest is made, which is a very good policy that Chief Spagnuolo put into place. So we're on it. We were grateful to have some time with the child advocate attorney Egan and her staff. We're all working together collaboratively in a positive direction, and I feel really good about the direction that we're going in, to the benefit of the students in the district and the city. So I'm and the superintendent's right. I mean, we're very transparent about what we do, and you know, that transparency, sometimes the numbers look a little different because different districts report things differently. So anyways, we're going in a good direction. I regret that I have to leave, but I will get the updates from Commissioner Sweeney after, and I also going to turn it back to you, Ann. I noticed Representative DG's got his hand up, and many others, and so I thank you all for your time. You're great, all of you. I'm looking forward to having a great end of the school year, working with everyone, and then working on the budget with you as well. So thank you all, and I'll catch up with you later.
Representative DG Van Carlo, followed by Ron Napoli, followed by Representative Butler.
Sure, I just want to speak to what Dr. Ruffin said and Mayor O'Leary. Part of the biggest thing is we are transparent. I don't like to speak to the police department. I'm only an officer, so I don't like to speak for the department, but I will tell you, we ran projects like Project Safe Neighborhood. We've used Wellmore in a program. Those arrests you see, more than 50% of the time did not even count as an arrest. The end game, it was never arrest. Yes, it counted as an arrest, as you know. So we were transparent on who we arrested. But in the end, and I think here's where we're different. We still show the arrest, but most of the time that arrest was either cleared through Project Safe Neighborhood. The kid would go to a program and speak to the lieutenant, speak to his peers, or it would be run through a program at Wellmore, and the arrest would never even count. So although it did look like an arrest, you know, it didn't count in the end. And again, I worked at Enlightenment School for years, I'd say one of the tougher schools, and the relationship, the bonds with the SROs and the kids are unbelievable. I always comment, no one ever saw the arrests we didn't make. You know, the shoes we bought the kids, the clothes we bought the kids, the food we bought the kids. So it's a great program. It was put in way before any other districts thought of it. Mayor O'Leary at the time, Chief O'Leary was way out front with the SRO program. We have veteran officers in the schools that have been there a long time that are, the last thing they want to do is make an arrest. So I just wanted to speak to that. Even though our numbers look high, the end game, they're not high numbers at all. Thank you.
Representative Ron Napoli.
Well, thanks, Ann. And look, I want to say I have seen firsthand how a school resource officer can really help our students and really help them turn their lives around. You know, when I was at Wilby High School, I watched the school resource officer. He was the football coach. He was a mentor. He was a guardian. He had an open door policy. You know, the last thing he ever wanted to do was to arrest somebody. And I'm glad that the district really, you know, is transparent about this. And if you look at the MOU that the city of Waterbury has, the Waterbury Police Department, that is a very good working document. That is going to really, you know, help Waterbury, you know, get the right people in place. And you know, I was showing one of my colleagues at the state capitol, and they told me they wish that their district had a document like that. So I think that's one sign that, you know, one positive aspect that shows we're going in the right direction. And I will tell you that the education committee did actually pass House Bill 6535, which is an act to look at school security overall. And we are going to ask them to investigate, you know, how these arrests are reported from district to district, so we can get some continuity here going forward. They will ultimately report back to the education committee on July 1 of 2022 with that report, and I will certainly share it with all of you. And look, Waterbury has some very good proactive SROs, you know, and I reached out to Chief Spagnola, and you know, we have room for SROs actually on that task force. And I'd like to see somebody from Waterbury on that task force. So we are making some you know, positive strides there, and we have recognized that there was an issue, and you know, we are going to rectify it going forward. So thank you all for that.
Thank you. Representative Larry Butler.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Napoli, for sharing that. And DG, our newest member, I can't tell you, I'm psyched to have you at the Capitol, brother. And just that perspective you bring of being a police officer really helps as well. And what you shared, I hope that people can appreciate that perspective. I wish the mayor was still on, because I really commend him for being so transparent about the whole situation. Both on some of the things that we've realized, we've had some shortcomings that we put things in the pipeline to address, and in terms of what we need to do for training to make sure that we could get better results going forward. And it sounds like we're going to be trending in the right direction once we get back to real life normal in the school system. This was one of the areas that really concerned me, but it was spoken on diversionary program, the project Safe Neighborhoods. That's a good thing that we need to utilize more in our juvenile justice system that we have, that we can also use as a diversionary method. We need to look at what Waterbury can do to actually put a more robust system in place to ensure that we could do more in the area of diversions. And I know the reporting isn't similar, but I would just ask this: is there some aspect to the reporting that you feel that other cities and school districts are doing that we may be able to take advantage of, and without completely changing the reporting system? Is there something we can tweak to kind of offset and mitigate some of the numbers that we're looking at here?
You talking to me, Representative? I apologize. You talking to me?
I think that's a question maybe for Dr. Ruffin. You're asking if the numbers that we send, if there's something she can tweak on her end. Is that correct? Because she does the reporting. So.
Yeah, when we look at how other school systems are reporting, it's been pointed out that they actually have a different reporting methodology. My question is, looking at their methodology, is there something that we can adopt to help mitigate our numbers?
So a piece of this that I know of is that in some districts, the courts are reporting the numbers. So unless a child actually goes before a judge, that number is never reported. And as it was spoken to earlier, we don't do that. So an arrest, maybe arrest at the school level, but then that child goes off to a diversionary program, finishes that diversionary program, and the arrest is expunged. But our records show that as an arrest. So that's a piece of it.
Can we modify that process?
Dr. Ruffin?
No, not according to what we're told when we're sitting at the table trying to make certain that we have all of the accurate information. It appears that there's a way that the police department tracks the record that they believe is consistent with the way that it needs to be done in Waterbury, but I'm not certain that it's the way that it needs to be or is recorded across the state. I don't, in answer to your question, Representative Butler, I don't know of any district's process, so to speak. I just know that they don't all report it, and they don't all report it accurately in the same way that we do. Our data is correct. I mean, you know, we sit side by side with the police department, with the Office of School Attendance, and with our school climate committee, and we go incident by incident to find out if it's accurate, when did it happen, what was the action, what was the consequence, and I believe, just in talking with colleagues across the state, that there are various ways of reporting it, from anywhere from not reporting it at all. So I just think that unless there is something that is required consistently, that people are going to continue to follow whatever they traditionally followed, because it doesn't look so bad.
Well, I certainly understand what you're saying. I just think that if there's some methodology that other police departments employ, that we may be able to adopt. I understand that you're talking about the validity of these arrests being accurate. Somehow they're getting around this process, and if we too can actually take advantage of that, I mean, that could be helpful. I'm just looking at the fact that looking at how to change the whole state versus, okay, can we tweak our process to make sure that our numbers don't look like we have all the bad kids in the state that go to school in Waterbury, and if that is truly concerned, then we need to look at maybe adjusting how we actually go about this. And if other large cities are actually putting a system in place that they can actually take advantage of the reporting, and in terms of the court appearance, and actually utilizing diversionary programs to help offset how they do their reporting, I'm just saying, I think it's worth taking a look at that to see what we could do, instead of us looking like, okay, we're going to, do the strict reporting, and we're not going to deviate at all, so that we always look like we have 2 or 3 times the amount of arrests as maybe a system that's larger than us have. So I would just ask that we take a look into possibly utilizing some of what those big cities are utilizing in terms of deviating from the court appearances and putting together a robust diversionary program to support that.
Commissioner Brown, and then Senator Hartley.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and have this discussion. And thank you for all that you're doing up at the state to support us. I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of legislative proposals related to social emotional learning. And I'm very proud of the work that Dr. Ruffin is spearheading in Waterbury, where we are actually, creating a system around social emotional. So it's not just a program, doing professional development and trying to hire social workers for all of our elementary schools that we have not had. So I think having that staff, which we talked about earlier, to be able to sustain this system of social workers and psychologists and so forth is really going to be critical to the prevention system and early intervention that a lot of we see our kids needing because of the trauma they've experienced or whatever's going on. So another piece of lowering these arrests in our schools, quite frankly, is really having the system in place for early intervention and prevention. And I think that's where we're moving towards, and we're very excited about that. So as you see these bills, about social emotional and so forth, know that that's really a critical component to serving our kids and helping them with their own social emotional issues that sometimes lead to escalation in fights or whatever. So we're very happy to see the proposals and your support for the social emotional. So thank you.
Senator Hartley.
Yeah, thanks very much. And listen, I want to just recognize this board, which is so proactive in bringing us together every year, and then also keeping in touch with us as we go through the legislative session. That is so crucial. I am also going to have to excuse myself because I have now a budget caucus that I'm going to go into. But I do want to say that, you know what, and I am quite frankly frustrated to hear this, issue every year that we've not gotten any traction on it, because it does feel like we are profiling this city and it's mischaracterizing the city in all candor, I think. So, and I do know some of the resource officers, and to Representative Napoli's point, it's an amazing unit that has made such connection with our youth. I'm next to the Kingsbury School, and I see the interaction, like just personally as a bystander. But what I wanted to say was, to my colleagues and Representative Napoli's point for us on the Education Committee, typically we, I know in the committees that I run, I keep what we call placeholder bills. Those bills that we have a title because as the session evolves, different things arise that we need to be nimble and flexible about responding and moving on. Is there any such vehicle that exists in education? And if there's not, I would suggest maybe we try to find something to amend to say some very simple language. SDE shall develop and implement a plan statewide for the reporting of school arrests, and give them a short window. Tell them that they've got to do it by October 1, 2021. This cannot be so difficult. We get one protocol in terms of how we report these cases. I don't know, I'm talking out loud, and Rep. Napoli is the expert on this because he sits on that committee, but I'm just saying, kind of challenge them.
Representative Napoli.
Yeah, so Senator, the Education Committee actually does have one or two placeholder bills this session. They usually do one or two every session.
So maybe we, talk to, the chairs, the vices, the rankings, and, lay out the problem. And I mean, very simple language. SDE shall, shall develop and implement a uniform reporting standard, a statewide uniform reporting standard for school arrests. Bingo, October 1, 2021. I mean, look, it's simpler, said than done, but I'm just saying, challenge them to, there should be uniformity. You're right, Dr. Ruffin. How do you have all these different methods. They don't represent what we're trying to get at. And I would think SDE would want that.
Exactly.
So I think, Ron and Representative Giancarlo and Rep Butler, maybe we circle the wagons and, we talk about that and, then go off and do a kind of a touch campaign to talk to the people on education so we can all, get that message across.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. And I just want to point out that there is the governor has appointed a new commissioner of education. I have not had a sit down with her yet, just because we are also busy JFing our bills and trying to get that done. And those deadlines are upon us now. And once we get past that, I will have a sit down with her and certainly bring some of these issues to her attention. So.
Yeah, good point, Ronnie. And so that means she's going to come before executive noms. So I'll get a crack at her there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Go, Joe. Anyone else on this topic? I'm sorry, Joan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm going to excuse myself now because I've got to kind of prepare myself for this budget caucus.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all your input and everything you do all year long. Thank you so much, Joan.
Yeah,
we so appreciate you.
We are blessed to have this board and your collective leadership. So thank you all.
Thanks, Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
Okay, be well.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything on that one, or should we move on?
Just one last comment.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, through the chair. I just kind of sit back and listen to this discussion because this topic has been just something that I have always paid attention to. I have the battle wounds from bringing this subject up year after year. And then we focus on how we report. But I think, I'm just thinking the chief is not here. And I'm not putting everything on him, but that's just kind of the way that we have reported things in Waterbury. And so I think there's going to, Ron, Larry, be a need to get some support from the state in terms of some consistency of how we report it. But in the meantime, Waterbury, we need to still work on, as Commissioner Brown mentioned, social emotional issues, diversionary issues, and continue to do that. We're losing one of our main people, in the cabinet that looks at student arrests. And I just hope that there's not a spike. We lost funding 2 years ago. We noticed a spike in the number of student arrests. So I just hope we keep that, at bay and continue with any type of new programs, any type of diversionary programs that we can for our students. So I just wanted to interject that and, just hope we just continue with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just for me, the state collects that data for some reason. There is some reason why they want that data. If they know what the reason is, they should be able to tell us how to effectively collect that data. So I would think that if you don't have an effective system for collecting that data and a uniform system for collecting that data, that your data is skewed. You're not going to get the answers you want. So I'm very happy to hear that our legislative body is behind us. And I thank you very much. And I look forward to your efforts in the next couple of weeks on this. Please keep us posted as you go through this. I appreciate that. So I'm going to move on to number 4, which is special education state reimbursement and cap. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Ruffin to start.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the brief overview over this topic from my part is going to be relatively short this evening, but we do recognize that we have 2 important documents. The last will be shared with the board in our meeting in April, because it is the newest report from our audit that was recently submitted for us to review, and it's going to be thoroughly reviewed with the board during the April meeting. I think there we're going to see some implications for budgetary implications as we continue to successfully implement a very strong and robust special education program in Waterbury. Our new director of pupil services will be reporting to us on April the 26th. And so I believe that it comes at a very appropriate time where we can have someone to take those documents, take the information within those documents, and to make some strong strategic planning for the direction of special education in our district. I also believe that through the ESSER 2 funds and additional funding that we have from whichever funding sources that we continue to have. I've heard several board members as well as the legislators mention the social and emotional. Again, with the funding that we're going to be receiving, some of that is not sustainable. So as we're really seeking to put in a very robust social and emotional structure for the entire system, and I think, and we should, but the sustainability of that coming through some of the fundings that we're having, if it's not going to be provided through Alliance and it's not going to be provided through the ECS, then we're really not doing something that we could say will be long lasting when we measure it and we find out that it is successful in the district. And then I'll stop there. If anyone has any questions, or if any members of my staff has any more to input in that area. I know Doreen works very closely with all of the funding throughout the system, and I know that Darren Schwartz has temporarily taking over the supervision of the special education staff until such time as our director comes to our district.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Just one extra comment here. I just want to thank the representatives for everything you're doing for us in Hartford and close to home. And so one thing I want to point out is the excess cost grant, excess cost. And so some of you are familiar with that, I'm sure, but just as a reminder, that that's been, I believe, capped at the State Department or in Hartford at 140 million. And so that's been capped for a while. And so what ends up happening is any special education cost that are 4.5 times our NCEP, which is our per pupil expenditure. So anything above $70,000 effectively, we're supposed to be reimbursed through the excess cost grant. But because that's been capped at $140 million, it's down to about 70 to 73% that we get reimbursed. And so effectively, if we former aldermen's on the call, and I know the Board of Education members here tonight see how much we spend for some of our students to get the services they need, and rightfully so. But they're not cheap. Some of them are less expensive than others. But if we spend $68,000 to send a student to get the services they need, we get no reimbursement. If we send a student for $100,000 that requires $100,000 services a year, we end up getting reimbursed about $21,000 worth of that. And because we don't get reimbursed above that $70,000 at a full funding, because it's been capped at 140 million. And so just another funding piece that also hits our budgets and hits the town and it hits the town budget because students require the services, they need it. Special education, the way we fund it in Connecticut, we're one of 4 states, is the way we kind of do it, and we're unique in that sense. And I know there's been some discussions at the state of how to do that, and that's not an easy solution we're going to solve here tonight. But if there's anything to look at in terms of trying to provide services, and if the state is getting extra monies from the federal government, I'm not sure if how exactly we can use that, but if we could look at fully funding the excess cost grant, that would certainly help us in our situation and help us provide the services that students need without extra burden on the city.
Hey, Darren,
Yes,
you may be familiar with the school finance project, but there is a conversation at the Capitol right now where districts all across Connecticut somewhat kind of pool their resources for special education. And, the goal of that is there won't be, there won't be a savings, but we wouldn't see an escalation in special education funding. It's a very interesting conversation anyway. And I can certainly put you in touch with the right people. But certainly something that we're all going to be hearing about down the road in the very near future.
And thank you, Representative Napoli. I think there was about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe the mayor organized the Connecticut School Finance Project to come and have a meeting with the Board of Education and the aldermen. And they do wonderful work. And you're absolutely right. It's about the inconsistency of costs, about students moving in and out. And we get many students in and out of Waterbury, and Doreen, you can't. How can you prepare for the amount of influx and outlet? It is a juggling act. It's very difficult. And for us to go back to some of the original comments from Dr. Ruffin, it's about sustainability. If we're going to initiate certain programs for our students, we need to know what to expect in terms of costs. And this is one big question mark for us on a yearly basis. And so, yeah, I'm familiar with that work, and I think they do excellent. And they're working really hard to try to fix this for the city and for the state. And if there's anything else I can add into that conversation, I'd be happy to attend or provide some more assistance with.
Okay, Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Tom Van Stone, and Representative Larry Butler.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to comment on that, Darren. I participated in a task force related to that, and it would set up an insurance pool on the state level, but it's predicated on existing funds. They never talked about what new funds would be needed in order to really make that parity across for the reimbursement. So I just think that if we're looking at that structure, which would create another entity, by the way, that would have to administer it, it would ask every district to put in their special ed money and then get reimbursed. But without new money, we'd be right back where we were. So I think without the bottom line is without the dollars to really cover the cost, that would not work. It wouldn't solve the problem. But anyway, it's worth looking at. I just want to mention there's a couple of bills, 6654, that would institute a child care tax credit, which would be great for our low-income families. The federal the feds are looking at 3,600 federal child care tax. So this would really help alleviate, and the data is showing us that this would really help alleviate poverty, especially in urban areas. So I really appreciate if you would look at that because I think it's really needed. Thank you.
You're muted, Ann.
Sorry, Commissioner Tom Van Stone.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Tom.
That's okay. That's okay, Commissioner Sweeney. Well, Darren, Mr. Swartz, and Commissioner Brown portrayed that quite politely. As you all know me, I will try my best. I can't guarantee I will bring that same message. We have extraordinary special ed costs here in Waterbury. And I've brought this up on every single time that we've had this sit down with our state representatives. You might be surprised, if you had not been listening to me, that much of our cost for special ed is actually for out-of-district expenses. Now, granted, our special ed students deserve, and we need, and we do give them every opportunity to have the best of, special ed education. And when I say it's about out of district, it's because of state law. Once an IEP is authored, that city remains at responsible party for those costs. Now, have we had some city and towns come forward and say, we got it? Yes, but very rare. Okay, so when these services are performed outside our district, we're covering the cost of both services and transportation. And as Darren mentioned, never mind the $70,000 threshold, or the number he quoted, and the percentage we received, we have numerous students that require hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of services, both transportation and education. Now, keep in mind, some of these students that were doing this, they live outside of Waterbury, but we still are responsible to cover these costs. We actually have students that are outside the state of Connecticut that we are paying the full tab to cover these costs. And we have asked for this relief in the past. I have brought it about every single time we have met between this board and the state representatives. And we have not seen anything happen. Although Representative Napoli said there's some action going on now, that has helped us in this particular case. We've actually gone so far, and I'm going back to the days of probably the best special ed coordinator and then academic officer that we have ever had, and that's Ann Cullinan. She taught me so much over my years on this board about special education. So much, not just how it works, but the business side of it, etc. She actually had a dream one time to say, let's open up our own school and we'll charge other folks to bring their children to us for special education. Because I'm going to tell you, we have the best special education department in the entire state. And I'll put them up against other states. Our special ed department is tremendous. And I'll go to bat for them every single day of the week. But we can't do that because we can make an offer to say, we will transport your student back to Waterbury and educate them here with our services to save us a ton of money. However, if that guardian says, no, thank you, but I declined, we are now paying that full expense. We need help. We need to change this law. We need to get a little more on our side to be able to bring students back to Waterbury to use our services, and it's only a transportation cost. So this is the same speech. I probably could have pulled up my notes from every single year on this board on what I say to our state delegation. And it's the same story. And as Mr. Swartz mentioned, not only is there a formula to give us some payment back from the state, but that's been decreased. So, I don't have the number right in front of me on the cost I'm referring to, but it's a big, big number. And please help us out here. This is a major cost. Operating budget takes away from other things we need to do. And you heard enough about budget tonight and how strapped we are. But this, because of state laws, we really can't offset. So we need your help. Thank you.
Representative Larry Butler.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Darren Swartz, for all that you do, but definitely for the explanation of the special education. And Commissioner Van Stone is very correct in terms of how long this has been an issue for the state. And I dare say that it's something that we really haven't addressed. I think that it's something that I've seen every year that I've been at the state, that people try to come up with a formula different ways to actually address it, whether it's looking at regional cost sharing to try to offset the cost. Every idea that I've seen floated just hasn't gained any traction, but I could tell you a conversation about doing something. I haven't been on the education committee from day one, so I can't give you the whole history, but I know that I've heard a lot of possible solutions that people worked on, but it just didn't get the traction to actually take the next steps of implement any meaningful solutions. Representative Napoli talked about something on the drawing board that may be able to help, but I agree that this is one area that if we did something could really realize big savings, because this is one of the, when I look at the discrepancy in terms of what a district is expected to spend for education, this is one area that I would think that really would get more attention. So in terms of addressing this going forward, I'd be more than happy to work with Rep. Napoli and the rest of the delegation in trying to do something to, even if we could just offset some of the reimbursement discrepancy that Mr. Swartz actually has identified, that would be helpful. But certainly, I agree, this is one area that we need to address and in a big way. And I don't know if there's enough school districts that have the same kind of problem in terms of the sheer dollars and impact on the bottom line that just doesn't allow it to have the support that it should get. But it's certainly an issue. Any middle-sized school district should have this problem as well. So I certainly hope to that we could actually do something in this area. And before I finish my comments, I just like to say that here in March that we're talking and having this round table discussion, generally we try to have this prior to the session starting. I just hope going forward that we again have these conversations before the session starts, because we have the ability to actually put solutions on the drawing board prior to the session actually starting. And we could get traction in taking some of your ideas that we've actually tried to work on in the past, some that we've been successful with, and actually do something with it. So please, going forward, let's make sure that we have this discussion before the session starts. Because as I say, we've had success in some things that we've actually had a joint venture on and supporting some of your initiatives. And certainly, whatever you come up with, if we could put it on the table from day one, it helps us with our ability to be successful.
Thank you. I hear you, Larry. We'll get that done for you.
And we want to be there for you.
Sweeney, if I could just respond to
Yep,
Representative
I see
Butler.
your hand.
Thank you. Sorry to jump in front of anyone. I just want
Yep.
Representative Butler just to
Commissioner Van
respond to you.
Stone.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much. Just to let you know, I only wanted to talk for Waterbury. However, there was an article in the Republican American a couple of years ago where Danbury and Torrington was making these same, and I don't want to call them complaints, but acknowledgement to how we were just very different than other towns and had this unequal responsibility based on the law that, that the plan for a student fell back on the originating town. So just to let you know, I know at least those two towns, per this article, also made the same statement. Thank you.
Hey, Ann, can I
Okay.
just say one more time?
Sure, Ron, go ahead.
All right, great, thanks. And Rep. Butler touched upon this. Just yesterday, we passed a bill in the Education Committee. I can't think of the bill number off the top of my head, but it would allow districts to share services. I don't want to use the R word, regionalizing, but it would allow districts to share services and cut the red tape. So, look, I mean, a lot of school districts have, assets that they can share with each other. This bill, if it goes forward, it's going to go to the House. We're going to get it through the House, and then it goes upstairs to the Senate. But again, it would allow school districts to share special education services, which would save districts like Waterbury a lot of money. So it's not that the state wouldn't mandate it. It's given local control. So the local Board of Education from any school district that wants to have this agreement could have this agreement going forward. But again, it would be advantageous for situations like this.
Thank you, Representative Napoli. Okay. Number 5, we left open.
And could I jump in there just before you leave 4?
Sure.
Quickly?
I think Will Clark, yep.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Will.
Just want to echo what Ron was just saying there and some of the other comments previously on that legislation and other pieces, but I would push back to the delegation just that one of the other problems with the special education is you essentially have districts sort of competing against each other to, dare I say, move students across borders. And the problem with that is that there is a budget impact that's very difficult to predict. So a student who could be costing one district literally $200,000, that student literally just moves across the street, and that $200,000 goes with the student and then breaks someone else's budget, or perhaps saving another district's $200,000. So while I like the idea of thinking about this from a regional perspective and sharing resources, I'm a big fan of that. I also think the state has to take a big role here. They love to enforce requirements on districts, particularly how we deal with charter schools, for example, how we deal with non-publics, without increasing our funding. They want, by law, us to fund them 100% for what they want, but we can't even, with a straight face, cover 100% of what we need for our students. So where's the balance there? But I think if this legislation, Representative Napoli, moves forward, one of the things I would propose thinking about is maybe the state funds some pilot dollars to encourage certain districts to try this out with some funding associated with it, so that there's a backstop or maybe some, regulatory freedom, if you will, but really the funding, and to support it. Because I think this could be an appropriate toe in the water of regionalization that can, in fact, be a win-win. Because everybody faces the cost of these across the state where these kids move. State kids, as you all know, have the constitutional right in Connecticut to education. So it's a state responsibility to begin with that's been pushed down on the districts. But clearly there's a lack of funding, lack of support, lack of awareness. The state can leverage to get those kids to appropriate placements with better negotiated deals. Terrific. If the state can help manage due process hearings to avoid additional litigation costs and actually focus those dollars on the students, terrific. If the state can share resources of sign language interpreters and speech pathologists and school psychologists, terrific. If those are state employees and it doesn't cost us a dime, even better. So I would, on behalf of Dr. Ruffin, be first in line to recommend that we participate in such a pilot. But there has to be funding behind it and support from the state.
Okay. Anyone else on that topic before I move on? Okay. Okay. So I left it other issues. So I want to move to my board and give them a chance to bring forth any other issues that they might have. So any of the commissioners online? Anything to add? Okay. All right. Doctor, you and your staff, anything else you'd like to bring forward?
And I do have my hand raised.
I have my
I'm
hand
sorry.
raised as
And I
well.
think Commissioner Harvey's trying to get into.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Harvey and then Tom Vanstone.
Okay, so I'd just like to bring up, first of all, that again, I thank the state on bringing forth the curriculum for Black and Latino history. I wish, however, that this had been mandatory, but it's an elective. And I wish that it had been put forth a little bit sooner, but we have it. It's great. And I want to thank you for that. But I know that there is a bill, I don't have the bill number, but there is a bill in the House to make studies mandatory. So I don't know where that stands, but I'm going to just kind of be watching that pretty closely to see where we go with that. But I just want to thank you, you both for that. Next, I want to thank you for I think it's HB 6 bill, House Bill H4 6439, the Crown Act. And that is a bill that states that it puts into law any discrimination due to hairstyles. My thank you for that, because that's a self-esteem issue, particularly for our girls. I know it's kind of in the workplace and stuff like that, but that is a self-esteem issue for our girls of color. And I want to thank you. I know it was 139 was the vote to approve, and I just want to thank you and Larry and Ron for that and voting for that bill. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I voted for it
Thank
too, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Tom Vanstone.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Again, to our delegation, another item I've brought up on each and every meeting such as this that I have attended since I've been on the board, and that is a busing reimbursement that years ago, I think 3, maybe 4 years ago, it stopped, was in the millions for bus transportation in general. And keep in mind that Waterbury is responsible. We contract the bus company. We pay the fees for whether it's propane or diesel. We cover all those expenses, and it's not just for the city transportation, it's also for the private schools. So that is a responsibility we take on, and millions of dollars was taken out of a reimbursement a number of years ago. I believe our current budget is looking for $16 million to cover this contract that will come up for bus transportation and expenses. My last recollection was we were being reimbursed in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 million. And at that time, our bus expense was about 10 million. That went to zero overnight, zero. I really would like, again, for that to be looked at, to why it went from millions of dollars to zero in one calendar year. And Doreen certainly can correct me or back me up, that is now an expense that comes out of our operating budget, the same budget that has to pay probably about 80+% of our operating budget just in salaries, most of which are contract negotiated salaries. So again, I ask our delegation to be in our corner and take a look at this and see why this went away and see if there's any chance. And again, I get the restraints, but we went from millions of dollars to zero in one calendar year that supports that effort. So thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Commissioner Racco Orso.
Just one quick thing. It was just nice seeing the delegation here tonight, and I want to thank them for all their hard work they do in the state for our city and the education department. I just wanted to thank all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It was nice seeing you after all this time. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? For myself, I will question, as I always do. There are any number of great bills out there that propose to do great things for districts and for students. But when those things come at a cost to districts, be mindful of all these things that we have talked to you about that are already constraining our budgets. And maybe that great idea really needs to wait for a better day. Just be mindful of spending our money. I believe that everybody has districts' best interest at heart. But if there's a price tag for districts on it and we can't, utilize funding to do that in the best way possible, then we're not doing the best service for our students when we do that. So, and any final words from our delegation? Anyone? Representative D.G. Giancarlo, did I see your hand start to go up?
Yes, yeah, it's up.
Okay, please
So,
go ahead.
I just want to comment to Commissioner Van Stone. I'm up there, I'm brand new, and I can assure you, Ron Napoli, Larry Butler, and Jerry Reyes are all fighting for the city as hard as they can. On my behalf, I'm sure Representative Napoli can get a chuckle out of this. I think the speaker and the majority leader are tired of me already, and we're marching down that office every chance we get to try to get the best for just not only the city, but for the education department and for every student, so that every student in this city is treated correctly. So we're up there fighting every day. It's a crazy start for me. I haven't experienced the real, office to office momentum, but we're up there every day, and you can trust that these guys have been fighting for a while, and I'm glad to join them in the fight to ensure we get the proper funding for our schools.
Thank you. Representative Butler.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you, our Board of Ed commissioners and Superintendent and everybody who supports you. I mean, you actually take care of our most valuable resource, and that's your children. I mean, so your calling is very special, and that isn't lost on us. So while we're at the state, please know that we do appreciate and very much value everything you do for the city of Waterbury. I heard some of the concerns, especially that Commissioner Van Stone has brought up, and we must do this at the beginning of a session because I'm telling you, to hear some of the things that make so much sense, especially Mr. Clark has brought up some good issues too. All of you have brought up some ideas that if we were to start from day one, we could try to get some traction from like-minded people and legislators around the state, because we all need to come together to actually make education actually work for all of our districts. Of course, our priority is Waterbury, but if we could work with other like-size towns and cities, they have the same issues we have. we need to make some inroads. I must say that we're very, I'm very hopeful because we have Representative Napoli on the Education Committee, and we haven't had a direct person representing us on the Education Committee in the past, and he's really kept us informed with a lot of what's going on in education. And when he needs our support, he calls on us to actually be supportive. So having him there is very, very important to us, but to the city of Waterbury too, our Board of Ed. So I know going forward that I have higher expectations, just knowing that he's the point person there. I do have a couple more questions maybe somebody could answer in terms of how we're actually going to address some of those federal dollars that we plan to use. I guess it's going to be broken up into 2 fiscal years, and how we're going to use it to address the virtual learning. That is, you know, probably a big concern for you, but I just like to know your thoughts on how you plan to use it, and if any thought was given to how to address the area of the achievement gap that may have been even falling even as a wider gap as a result of virtual learning. If somebody could speak to those things, it would help, because when I'm going to fight for ECS money, or the people who make the argument of federal funding for education and the ECS fund, if I know your ideas in this area, it will help me fight better at the state. Well, I shouldn't say me alone, us fight. So could somebody speak to that?
Dr. Ruffin?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Representative. Absolutely. We have created in Waterbury a reimagining education think tank. It is a group of stakeholders throughout the district. It includes community partners as well as school staff, as well as parents. You know, it will have voices of students, and what we're doing and our approach is to be very strategic about how we spend the money. You know, sometimes when people see that you've come across the money, you know, everybody's hand comes out and says, what can I get from the school district? And, you know, and we're very, very serious when we say that it's going to have to be aligned with the Board of Education strategic plan. So it's not, you know, what can we add more to be able to spend the money fast, but rather what can we add with a return on our investment? And so that's going to take time for us to be able to get those collective voices to create a plan. Members of my executive staff who are on this call right now are also chairing 5 committees that we have. They have their committee members, and they've started meeting as recently as yesterday. And we'll have another meeting on Thursday, and we'll have another meeting before the end of the month to be able to summarize a draft of what we will propose for how the monies will be spent in the 4 categories that were delineated by the federal as well as the state Department of Education. So we're going to be very strategic in how we spend it and how we can account for its effect on student learning in the district. We also know, and again, I thank all of you because you do advocate for Waterbury. I hear it all the time, and I receive messages, you know, frequently to be able to keep us abreast of what's happening or what we should be alerted to. And so while I see sometimes there's additional requests for courses that our students are going to be required to take before they can graduate, I just want you to be aware that that also comes with some kind of budgetary impact on the district. So before you would approve anything like that, you know, I ask for your continued interaction with superintendents across the state, because when we keep adding courses, we also know that we have to staff it. And I'm in support of that. But at the same time, you can't keep adding without knowing that you also have to have the staff and the support of being able to finance that staff member or those staff members over a course of time to make sure that all of our students, there's equitable distribution and availability for students to take courses. I saw something in one of the one of the bills, I think, to add some additional graduation requirements. And while we add additional graduation requirements, also keeping in mind that the state of Connecticut has not uniformly addressed extending the school day for everyone. So there are different districts have different blocks of time in the day in a schedule. And so you can't keep adding to that schedule unless you also have a budgetary impact on the district. Just to be aware of that. So I hope I answered your question and how we're going to spend the money. It's going to be very strategic. It's going to be with a lot of community input, and it's going to be finalized with the board approval when we get to that point, when we have our plan and before we submit it to the state. And we're going to have to be able to determine a return on our investment. So it will be measurable.
Okay, thank you. And please share that with us once you so as we're arguing and fighting for education dollars, we could actually have an idea of what you had in mind so we could direct our fight accordingly. And the second part of that question was addressing the perceived education achievement gap that as a result of probably not being in the classroom. Is there any consideration of how we could address that?
Yes, that's all in that plan as well. One of the first categories of funding for the appropriate use of the ESSER II funds is for educational supports for our students. So that's all a part of that plan. It will have to be significantly different than what we've done in the past, because we know that has not rendered the kind of success that we want to see or that we need to see in our district. So rethinking that and reimagining that and putting not only a program, it's not going to happen with tutoring, I can assure you of that. So how it happens within a school schedule to be able to mitigate any learning loss that we anticipate students may have experienced, that's going to be within the plan. And we have an entire section for teaching and learning that's addressing that as we prepare to appropriately spend or recommend spending for the ESSER II funds.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that. And please know we're there for you, and we're your biggest fans too, because your success is our success. So just know that we're going to do everything we can to support you.
Thank you very much. We all appreciate that.
Representative Napoli.
Thanks, Ann. And Ann, thanks for bringing us all together like this. It's a very informative evening for all of us. I just want to bring up something that was not touched upon tonight, that the delegation is working very hard towards, and that's minority teacher recruitment. And we have a bill in the Education Committee, and the bill actually targets high school students. There's a program that SDE has started called Ed Rising, and the city of Waterbury. I'm very impressed with the participants that we have here on a local level. That's certainly a testament to all of you and the teachers and the school staff who work for our district. And again, I want to thank you all for all that you do. You know, those of us in the delegation were all local officials before, and we know how hard you work. And I want you to know that, you know, whenever you need us, we are there. We are fighting for you at our state capitol. You know, a lot of things happen that everyone doesn't always see. You know, and I'll give you just a quick example. And I'm sure Rep. Butler can talk to this with his experience, but, you know, just with the ESSER grants, right? That second round of ESSER grants, you know, we were able to bring back a lot of money to the city of Waterbury. And, you know, we have colleagues that want to add restrictions to that, right? And we have to go and rally against them and argue against them because that ties your hand, right? I mean, you know how to spend that money to help our students and teachers and staff better than anyone else. So, you know, a lot of things happen that everyone doesn't always see that we are fully engaged with. But again, you know, I thank you all for the evening. And as you all know, you know, feel free to contact us anytime. You can contact us. You don't have to go through our aides. Call us directly. And again, we thank you for all the work that you do and look forward to working with you tonight and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, then we will wrap up for tonight. Again, my profound thanks to the delegation. You guys always come through for us. And this is one of the most pleasurable pieces of my board work that I do each and every year. So thank you for making it possible. Thank you for making it enjoyable. And thank you so much for everything that you do for us.
Thank you, guys.
With that, well, I'll say goodbye. See you all soon.
Thanks, Ann.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.